Welcome back here today on the beautiful campus of Florida Panhandle Technical College. Another in our series of what's going on in the community. Our guest today is Libby Harper, all the way from Dothan, Alabama.
Yes.
She's from the Center for Vein Restoration. Immediately, I see most of our viewers kind of nodding off, their eyes half closed, saying, my goodness, you're talking about old people diseases. You're talking about stuff that, you know, my great-grandmother had that, but I'll never have to worry about it. Interestingly, even if you're in your 20s, you can be affected by vein problems that can be easily remedied. The important thing there is to be diagnosed, to be at least cognizant of what vein issues might be, and then to be able to self-diagnose, if you will, from that point forward. Certainly, if you're older, if you're sedentary, don't get a lot of activity, you're prime candidate for some of these. When we come back, we're going to talk to Libby about what you should be aware of when it comes to healthy veins. And more importantly, when you do develop a problem, maybe how the Center for Vein Restoration may just exactly be the answer that you're looking for. We'll be right back. Welcome back. As mentioned, our guest today is Libby Harper from the Center for Vein Restoration. It's a mouthful, and I'm surprised your name tag is not larger.
I know, I need a big one across my chest.
First of all, thanks for coming down from Dothan today.
My pleasure, my pleasure. This is what I love to do.
You contacted us, if I'm not mistaken, and said, hey, listen, I know you've got a Kiwanis Club in Chipley, Florida. Would love to speak to some of your members. One thing that we may not have discussed, but that is obviously true, when you get into fraternal organizations in this day and time, it's getting tougher and tougher to attract new members because there's always more things going on.
Right.
And if you're of an age, which typically is older, maybe nearing retirement or in your middle ages, it's easier to be parts of those organizations. So we find that guests such as yourself, talking about maladies which may affect people of that certain age, you maybe have a little more attentive audience than if you spoke to the Boy Scouts, for instance.
Very much so, yes.
Certainly. So so that works out perfectly. You will be speaking to our Kiwanis Club. As I typically do, I try to double dip a little bit and get our Kiwanis speaker to come speak to us either before or after. So thank you for that. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
What are we talking about when we talk about problems with veins, and where would your medical procedures come into that?
Okay. First off, the veins are kind of the least known part of the blood circulation in the whole body. Everybody's very concerned about arteries, and they should be. Arteries are very important. Arteries take the oxygenated blood to the tissues. Once that oxygen gets dropped off, the veins' job is to bring the deoxygenated blood, the carbon dioxide, the waste product from the muscles, back up to the heart and lungs where we breathe off the carbon dioxide. We take in more oxygen and it starts the whole circle. But people don't talk about the veins. For many years, all they offered was vein stripping, and we still get people say, oh, no, my grandmother had vein stripping and it was horrible.
Now what is that?
That's when they go and actually cut the leg open and they remove the veins, and there's a lot of stitches, it hurts, you're laid up for a long period of time. That's the old school.
That's pretty nasty.
It is nasty, and it doesn't do good. We've had a lot of people come with problems that have had vein stripping. That's old school. Times have changed.
Before you move on, and I hate to interrupt you, but let's address that. For what reasons would they have gone to that stripping process?
When they had the big bulgy veins, some people get huge bulging veins in their legs, and they hurt. They're very, very painful. A lot of times they can form blood clots in them. And the only option they had was to cut those veins out of the leg. They didn't have the technology of ultrasound where they could look inside and see what's going on.
Or microsurgery.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't have lasers and all that we have nowadays. So they would just cut the veins that they saw on the outside of the leg. They'd make large incisions and pull the vein out.
Okay.
And so you were laid up for quite a while.
Yeah.
So that was a nasty procedure. We don't do that. That's old school. It's so much simpler nowadays.
Is it still done at all?
Some, unfortunately, there are a few doctors we've heard of that do it, but it's very, very rare. And I think it's done much more precisely now than it used to be, but still.
But there may be cases where it still may be a last resort?
As a very last resort, because
Gotcha.
there's so many other ways now that you can really treat veins that are not as invasive. The recovery time is much simpler.
Okay.
So no hospitalization. So
Gotcha.
it's come a long way.
Okay, so now here we are in the 21st century.
Yes. What we do is, and we freak everybody out, we close veins down. Everybody's used to arteries. Oh, you've got to open your arteries, you have to put stents in, we have to do all this. Veins are just the opposite. When there's a problem in a vein, there's too much blood in that area. Veins have what's called reflux if they're not working correctly. That means the blood is coming back down the leg and causing that vein to distend and get bigger and bigger. Inside of the veins are one-way valves that open and close with muscle contraction. That blood is trying to come back up to the heart and lungs so we could breathe off the carbon dioxide and take in more oxygen. It's just a big circle. Unfortunately, on our legs, that liquid has to fight upstream all day long. From the time we get up in the morning to the time we go to bed, our feet are on the floor, whether we're sitting or we're standing. And it's fighting gravity all day long. So those one-way valves are in place to keep that blood moving in a one-way direction. The problem comes when those valves don't work very well, and it's mostly genetic. There are other factors that can cause it, but it's primarily a genetic situation.
Okay.
Those valves don't close well, they don't stay tight. And so when the blood goes up the leg and the muscle relaxes, it slams back down the leg and goes back through that valve and to the next working valve downstream and starts to pull, and it stretches and it stretches. And of course, gravity's pulling that fluid down, and it breaks the next valve downstream because it can't handle the pressure. And then that liquid goes all the way, that pressure goes all the way to the surface of the skin, and that's where you see the spider veins starting to develop. And so it's a progressive disease because of gravity constantly pulling that fluid back downstream. The longer it goes on, the more valves are going to break down. I always say it's kind of like if you take an anthill, a little kid's ant farm that you can see the plastic, and you pour liquid in that top hole, that one hole, that liquid's going to go into every tunnel downstream. Same thing with that backflow of that blood. That liquid is going to go into every vein down below the problem area. And so a lot of people that have spider veins, and we think of, oh, I just have ugly spider veins. That can be caused from a bigger vein underneath that you can't see with the naked eye, where that backflow is happening and it's pushing that extra blood out to the surface of the skin and causing those veins to stretch out.
Okay.
Just so you know, a spider vein is a varicose vein. They're one and the same. The little tiny veins have valves in them too, but they're just very microscopic, even more so than the veins, bigger veins in the leg.
So it might make us feel better if we say they're spider veins, they're not varicose.
Yeah, well, I get that a lot. Oh, I don't have varicose veins, I just have spider veins. And I'm like, no, you have varicose veins.
Okay, you said in large part hereditary.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of our population out of hereditary purpose, or what am I trying to say? What portion of our population is affected in this way through hereditary means?
Oh, gosh.
Ballpark.
I would say probably about 50 to 60%.
Wow.
Yeah, there's over 3 million people, that's just really loose, that have this problem or more, but only about 1 million or so get it treated. So, and I think the number's gone up since then, but there's a lot of people that suffer from this.
Unnecessarily?
Unnecessarily, yeah, there's no reason to. Because when we close a vein down, we do it in our office. It's a simple procedure that's done nowadays. There's no stitches, there's no downtime, you're not put to sleep for anything, so you don't have to bother with the hospital and all those charges. And it's done through lasers and heat closures now and chemical closure. So they just put an IV into the vein so there's no stitches, and then through that IV they run the whatever method of closure that we're going to use, and they numb up around the vein. And as they close that vein down from the inside, when they pull it out, it's just a little hole, just like having an IV. Same thing.
I would venture to guess that maybe there are a lot of people that don't pursue medical treatment because they feel that maybe their insurance won't cover it, mm-hmm. or that it's an expensive procedure. Yes. Or that some may scoff at them for doing cosmetic surgery.
Right.
What you're illustrating through what you just described is that if you have this situation, it's one thing and it may be unsightly, but it could potentially be a much more severe health issue. Let's start with the insurance part of it.
Okay.
Will insurance cover some of this, and what kind of standards are used there? Insurance
will cover the first visit, because we have to do a full ultrasound. We check everything from groin to ankle.
So that would be the diagnosis part?
That's the diagnostic visit. We check the deep veins to make sure there are no blood clots. And then we make a map of the patient's legs, both of them, and to see where the problem is. Then you meet with the physician at that time and he goes over the results. So you don't have to wait a few days or whatever to get the results. You get them immediately. And he'll talk to you then. If you do have a problem in one of the veins, he'll go ahead and explain to you the different procedures that we can do to close those veins. And then we can set you up for an appointment. We don't ask you to sign a contract. You're not committing yourself to anything. It is a diagnostic visit to find out what exactly the problem is. And for some people, just knowing is a relief off their mind. Even if we don't find anything, at least they know. They don't have to sit there and wonder, I wonder, is that, the pain in my leg from the veins? If it's, if there's nothing wrong, then you know that's something you can check off your list and go on. But if there is a problem in one of the bigger veins in the legs, almost all insurances will pay for that. That is a medical concern because varicose veins is a progressive disease. It will get worse over time. The veins will bulge more. The skin can actually break down. Varicose veins cause swelling. You can get a lot of swelling in your legs and your feet. It can break the skin tissue down. It's what's called stasis dermatitis, and it's where the skin starts turning brown around the ankles and from about mid-calf on down. That skin tears very easily and ulcers can form. And that ulcer will not heal without the vein treatment because you go to wound care, they treat the wound, but they're not treating what's causing the skin to break down.
Yeah, and if you have no blood flow,
Yeah.
that's from where all health
Well, you have
sprouts.
blood flow. I mean, I'd just like to get this clear because people say, oh, you have no blood flow. You've got arterial blood coming down there with the oxygen if your arteries are okay. So you've got oxygen coming to the tissue. That's not what's destroying it. It's the blood coming out of the leg. You've got too much blood there. And that when those veins stretch, they actually leak down inside the body, and the body sends in what's called macrophages to chew up the protein that's in that tissue. And it chews up the skin too over time because it's just progressive. Like I said, it'll just keeps chewing, and that's what breaks the skin down. So you have too much blood in the area. So that's why we can close the veins down, and it doesn't hurt the body, it helps the body. It takes the pressure off of all the healthy veins in that area so they can do their job effectively and get the blood out of that area. Think about if you've had a vein taken out for a heart bypass. A lot of people have that vein taken out that they use. It doesn't harm the leg. We do it all the time. Doctors do heart bypass all the time and use those veins. So we can close veins down in the legs and it does not hurt the leg. It helps the leg. The body will grow new veins and arteries all the time. If you think about somebody who's had a leg that's been almost cut off and they're able to reattach now, wonderful surgeries, reattach hands. Those veins and arteries have to grow across those incisions in order to feed that tissue. So our bodies are wonderful in that way that we can keep that blood flow moving. So that's what we do is we close these veins down to stop that problem. We turn off the valve. It's like a leaking hose. We turn the leak off and then all the healthy veins around it can start moving the blood faster because that pressure is off of them.
So this medical condition is only from the waist down, only in the legs?
That's what, yes, primarily because of the gravity.
Right. At what point in our legs does this start to be visibly noticeable? From the knees down, or can it be anywhere?
It can be anywhere.
Okay.
You can have it in the thighs, you can have it in the backs of the legs, calf area, down the front. It really doesn't matter. It can be all over the place. And that's one thing we do at our office is we treat the whole leg. There are some doctors in the area, but they treat above the knee. And unfortunately, you can still have a lot of problems going on below the knee that has to be treated too. Otherwise, it'll reopen over time.
Now, much like you're going to be doing today, you brought an ultrasound machine, and you're actually going to be looking at some of our Kiwanis Club members' legs, those who would like to do so. So there's the preventative part of it that perhaps as an older adult, even if you don't have symptoms, you may want to get checked out.
Sure.
If you're not of a mind to do that or don't have the opportunity, for what symptoms should we be looking that may be that precursor of issues that do need an office visit?
One of the main ones is swelling, pain.
This is now all in the legs?
All in the legs, yes. Restless legs have now been related to it also if you've got a vein problem. There are other things that can cause restless legs, but if you have a vein problem, and you have restless legs, we've discovered that more and more people are getting relief from their restless legs by getting the vein treated. Same with leg cramps. So those are two symptoms that can be related to it.
And let me just stop you there for a second, so I don't forget. Talk about restless legs. What is restless legs?
Restless legs is a feeling where your muscles just want to contract and release, and you just feel like you can't keep your legs still. You have to keep moving. You have to move your feet. A lot of people just experience it at night where they just feel like they have to get up and walk, and it keeps them awake. The muscles are just almost contracting and releasing.
And forgive me for interrupting you, but
Sure.
I think that's important that, when you use terms like that, I mean, there are probably a lot of our viewers who say, I think I got restless legs, but I don't really know what that is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
True, very true. So that's a good reason to explain it. So a lot of people do have that symptom. And like I said, if you have a vein problem, you may not see the veins, but it may be going on inside, deeper in the leg. That can be one of the symptoms of it. The only way you can know is by having an ultrasound. You cannot diagnose a bad vein any other way than an ultrasound.
Okay.
So, and I do want to make a point too that Dr. Todd is our doctor at the office, and he is a phlebologist. A phlebologist is a vein doctor. He doesn't do arteries. We don't replace knees. We get that asked a lot. Can you work on my knees, my hips? All he does is veins. But he's been doing this almost 20 years, and he is top notch. He is in the top of the game, and we're the only physician facility that has different modalities. And what that means is different ways to close veins down. Not every procedure fits every vein, because some veins are real twisty, turny.
Sure.
Some are real big, obviously not that big, but some are very big and some are smaller. So you need different ways to close veins down that'll work for that vein. The majority of doctors have one way. Dr. Todd, we have 3 ways through Center for Vein Restoration. So we can treat more people with different types of legs.
Well, at the end of the day, if you're going for something which potentially could be life-threatening or something that affects your health or well-being,
Right.
you typically these days want to go to a specialist.
Yes.
I had rotator cuff. I wanted to go to a guy who did those every day, all day long.
Exactly.
And he didn't do anything else because I wanted to have the best guy possible. When we come back, we're going to talk to Libby Harper a little bit more about exactly what they do at the Center for Vein Restoration. I think you'd agree this is an interesting topic. I asked the question about restless leg because I know several people who have described symptoms similar to that, and they really don't know what their issue is, but it may be something worth looking at the Center for Vein Restoration. When we come back, we're going to talk about all this and more, and we will be right back. Welcome back. As mentioned, our guest today is Libby Harper from the Center for Vein Restoration. Learning a lot about veins. I got tons of questions. We're probably not going to have time for all of them.
Sure.
But we're talking about the venous return of blood to the heart in that closed plumbing system, which
Right.
is our cardiovascular system.
Exactly.
And we have check valves in our veins, which keep, in theory anyway, the blood from going back away from the heart as it's pushed through that cycle. These check valves start to fail, and so we have blood pooling in our lower extremity.
Yes.
Thumbnail sketch, would that be a fair assessment?
That's a wonderful assessment of it, yes.
Okay, so now we know what the fundamental issue is that we're talking about. Now let's talk about how somebody would find out more information. We went to your website, beautiful website, lots of information. What is your website?
Centerforvein.com.
Centerforvein.com. Okay. There you can find out a little bit about Dr. Todd.
Yes.
Certainly a lot of what you've been talking about. We always hesitate to direct people to a website because then they're sort of in the realm of self-diagnosis.
Right.
We notice that yours always has that caveat, when in doubt, contact us. You mentioned that for the most part, and I hate to even say this kind of a blanket statement for fear that people are going to abuse it, but you say typically the diagnostic visit is covered by insurance.
Yes.
So probably not a lot of reason for people not to get something checked
Right.
if they think there's a potential for problems.
Yes, exactly.
Talk a little bit about what happens during that diagnostic visit again. I know you talked about it briefly.
When a patient comes in for their first visit, we do a full vascular ultrasound. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, I had it done at the hospital. They checked me. When you go to the hospital and you have it done, they are looking for one thing and one thing only, and that's blood clots in the deep veins, DVT. And that's wonderful, that's their job. They don't care themselves with the superficial veins, and that's what we do. We look at all the superficial veins. So that first visit is a deep vein scan. We make sure there are no blood clots there, and then we look at all the superficial veins and check the flow in all those.
Okay.
And so then at that time, then you meet with the nurse after that, and then she gets some background history on you, and then Dr. Todd reviews everything, and then he comes in and sits down and talks to you and explains, this is where your problem is, this is what's going on, and this is how we can help you. And this is how the treatment proceeds.
So the whole visit is non-invasive, both medically and from a confidentiality point of view.
Right.
At this point, you are visiting a doctor, so you're probably going to have to fill out some paperwork.
Yes.
But it's not like you're going to. Here's where I'm going with this.
Okay.
Many times when we think we may be having heart problems, we don't go to the doctor because we don't want some kind of a pre-existing paper trail, so that if we go for another job, well, you were seen for heart problems. Well, no, I was just going to see what my problem was because I was short of breath.
Right.
It's amazing how many people will not go for medical attention for fear that affects them, obviously financially,
Right.
if insurance is not going to kick in and pay for it, but it will affect it. Because let's face it, our HIPAA laws are very strong about anybody who's not supposed to find out information, but in reality, there's a very broad spectrum of people who do find out when you go for credit, when you go for a new job. They find out about these, and so sometimes they don't want to have a record of pre-existing conditions. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
So,
it does.
so this is completely non-invasive because all you're doing is talking one-on-one to a doctor, and he will maybe give you offers of advice. Now, I would imagine many times he's saying, hey, you don't have a thing to worry about. You got the veins of a 23-year-old.
Yes.
So let's talk about the alternate diagnosis when he starts to find some kind of issues. What are the variety of things that he may suggest?
I mean, other than what we would do at the office? Or?
Well, no. I mean, going forward, he
Okay.
sees something
Okay.
of note that he's a little bit concerned about. We've already covered the scenario of, hey, there's nothing I can do for you. Check back in 3 or 5 years. But he sees something. What are the variety of things that he may have seen? And then what are the prognosis as going forward from there?
Okay. Well, you either have reflux or you don't.
So that's a
number
black and
one.
white.
It's black and white. We can't skew the test. We can't. When you do the ultrasound, it's either there or it's not. If you do have reflux, insurance dictates it has to be a certain amount of time that we're watching the backflow happen. If it's under the amount of time that insurance deems medical, they won't pay for it, and he'll tell you that.
So again, going to that emergency room or the hospital stay, they're looking for clots. They don't
Yeah.
qualify for that diagnosis.
No, they are not looking at superficial veins at all.
Gotcha.
So if your reflux amount of time, that's the time that the blood backflows down the leg, is longer than what the insurance deems as medical, then that is covered by, any procedure to close it is covered by insurance then.
Okay, so now we've got a diagnosis of reflux, backflow. We have determined that it is indeed covered by insurance.
Right.
Person's at rest, at least financially.
Yes.
All right, so what are the variety of things that you may have to proceed to in the way of procedures from that point forward?
All you have to do is make your appointment, because Dr. Todd, and looking at the ultrasound, will determine which type of closure is best for your veins. Make sure you're in our office, through corporate, will make sure your insurance covers that type of closure. So we do all that for you so that you don't have to worry about, because there are different modalities of ways of closing veins, not all the insurances cover all the methods. So
Sure.
Dr. Todd will have them look and make sure. We will not set you up for a procedure and just say, oh, I'm sorry, by the way, your insurance isn't going to cover that.
Sure,
We'll
sure.
make sure that's covered beforehand. You will be measured for compression stockings. We do have you wear the compression stockings just for a few days afterwards. This is not a lifetime commitment. It's just to help give some pressure on those veins so they close down very well.
It's part of the therapy.
It's part of the therapy. And then we will have you walk immediately after the procedure. We want you to walk. We want you to be up and active. We don't want you going home and laying down and putting your leg up.
Sure.
Blood clots form by slow-moving blood. And when you lay down and lay around, your blood's moving very slowly through that system. So you have a higher chance of developing a blood clot from not moving around. So we want you up and active. We want you back to your regular activity. we do not give you any medication. We don't give you anything for pain because it's not terribly painful. There are a few needle sticks, so I'm not going to lie to people, but it's not horrible. It really isn't. We use very, very fine needles, and usually over-the-counter stuff will handle it just fine. And so we will put you in that stocking after the procedure, and you go walk, so you don't have to worry about being loopy afterwards and having to have someone drive you. Almost everybody that comes drives themselves to and from the procedure. And then right afterwards, we ask you to walk, and we ask you to walk twice a day for the next week. And it doesn't have to be a speed walk. You're not trying to outpace anybody, but just a good continuous walk for about 30 minutes. So it's not asking a lot. We've actually gotten a lot of people who have brought walking into their lifetime routine because they had to do it for the procedure, and then they discovered they started feeling better from walking. So we get a lot of people that come back and say, I really am enjoying my walking now. So the cardiologists love us because we're getting people up and moving.
In the interest of complete disclosure, I am not a shill for your business. You're not a sponsor of our show. You're not paying us to say this. But what my resulting thoughts coming away from this conversation is that shame on the individual if they don't at least check into what appear to be potential problems.
Yes.
If you are of a certain age, certainly nothing wrong with just getting the ultrasound done. If you're getting a free diagnostic visit, or your insurance will at least cover it, shame on that person for not having something done. And certainly if you see signs and symptoms such as you're talking about, go get something done, because this could be life-threatening. Now let's go to that nth degree. Someone allows this to go untreated.
Right.
Aside from death and dying, what are some of the long-term results? Obviously amputation, that sort of thing?
Not usually, well, in extremely rare instances, but blood clots, because that blood is not moving through the vein fast.
Okay.
And there are two different kinds of blood clots. Now there's a DVT, deep vein thrombosis, and that's the kind they put you on blood thinners for. We check that constantly.
Because those can then cycle through the system.
Pieces can break off and get up to your lungs.
Stroke.
And pulmonary embolism,
Right.
that's the main one.
Okay.
So we watch that very carefully.
Okay.
And then there are blood clots in the superficial veins called SVTs. Those are not as serious as the deep vein. Those are not the kind that break off and go to your heart and lungs, so you're not put on blood thinners, but they're extremely painful.
Is that S shallow or surface for the SVT?
SVT is superficial venous.
Superficial, gotcha.
Any vein other than the deep vein, which is in by the bone, is considered a superficial vein.
Gotcha.
So it could be from the spider veins all the way down to the little bit greater saphenous and all that. All those are superficial veins. So if you get a blood clot in one of those from the valves not working and the blood moving very slowly, then that gets red hot and sore. A lot of people used to call it like phlebitis.
Yeah.
And stuff. That was a blood clot, inflammation in the vein, and it caused a clot because the blood is not moving through it correctly. So we want to stop that from happening. We take care of that. We close that vein down where that blood is not moving correctly, so we take out the equation of a blood clot ever forming.
Is this a universal concept? In other words, does modern medicine already embrace all of this, or is this something which is sort of on the edge and not all MDs would necessarily advocate? Is this something that's pretty mainstream?
It is becoming more mainstream. It is newer in the medicine region.
I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, because we still have some doctors who don't understand what we do. It wasn't taught in med school. Some of the doctors that are in their 60s and stuff that went through med school, this was not taught.
Sure.
They thought if you could rip a vein out, for stripping, then, we don't need to bother with them.
Is part of that also, and I hate to say this, and there's all kinds of doctors just like there's all kinds of people, but in some cases the doctors would rather prefer that procedure be done by him, and that's one of the things that he can do versus sending to somebody who's a specialist, and it would therefore...
Most of them won't touch it. What we hear more often is there's nothing they can do for it, just learn to live with it.
Instead of referral.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so we have a physician liaison with our corporation he goes out and educates the nurse practitioners and the physicians what all we have to offer. And that's helped tremendously, because I remember I've been with Dr. Todd for 10 years now, 8 of it as a vascular ultrasound tech, and the last 2 out in the community. And after I'd started working there about a year, I had a lady who came in who had the bulging veins in both legs, and her legs just hurt all the time. And she said, I've been wanting to come, but my doctor told me that don't bother, that all we did was cosmetic there. And she said, I thought I had to have a referral. And she said, so one day I just took it on myself to call and see if I had to have a referral. When I found out I did not have to, she said, I went ahead and made the appointment. Well, we treated her legs, and she just hugged and kissed us afterwards because the pain went away, the swelling went away, and she felt her legs had energy in them again, which she hadn't had for years. And she said, I went back and told my doctor that he was wrong, that you guys do great work there. It's not just cosmetic.
By definition, you mentioned nurse practitioners. By definition, nurse practitioners have not been around that long.
No, that's a newer area.
So typically they are going to be younger than some of the older doctors, so maybe they would be more aware of your procedures and also more open to new ideas.
Right.
No doctor, just by their Hippocratic oath, no doctor wants to cause more damage to their to their patient. However, sometimes ignorance gets in the way.
Yes.
And sometimes our own ego gets in the way. I'm a doctor. If I can't fix it, there's no fix for it. Libby, thanks so much for taking the time. Your website is centerforveins.com or
centerforvein.com.
Singular vein. Centerforvein.com. That's on the screen right now. If you want to have more information, would that be the best way? What's your phone number? Give our audience that.
Well, I'll give you my cell phone number because I don't work in the office. I'm out in the field all the time, but that's 334-618-1990. And that will bring you directly to me, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. And I am available to come talk to any organizations. My passion and my goal is to educate the public. I'm not doing this for money. We don't charge anything for this. It is strictly to help people change their lives and make them up mobile and feel like they can move. Because I see so many people in their 60s and 70s who say, I just can't get around because my legs hurt so bad. And there's no need for that. I mean, obviously there's arthritis and other things, but if you can take one of the things that's causing pains out of the equation, it's amazing how many people can get up and get moving again.
Well, I'm glad that you give your number because that's what I'm speaking mainly about, the educational component of this whole process. Until you become educated about a potential problem, you don't know you have a problem.
Exactly.
And so you can't fault somebody for not knowing that a thing even exists. Hats off to you. You actually are spending an awful lot of time in the community.
Yes.
When we first contacted you, said, can you put me in touch with any of the other clubs and fraternal organizations? And that's what we're trying to help you do now. Great stuff. Unless we know that a problem exists, it's not a thing in the world.
Right.
And, you hate to be standing over somebody's grave saying, boy, if they only knew about whatever. Again, great work. Thanks so much for all that you do. Thanks for taking the time for coming down today.
It's been my pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to meeting with the Kiwanis group and answering questions and looking at legs.
Yeah, very good. I like that. Thanks again.
You're welcome.
Our guest today is Libby Harper from the Center for Vein Restoration out of Dothan, Alabama. She's speaking to our Kiwanis Club today. If you have a fraternal organization, if you're a member of a Lions Club, a Rotary Club, a Kiwanis Club, any of those kinds of organizations, I know because I'm the program chair for my club that you've got to get a program every week or every month or however often you meet. Libby, a great opportunity. Her phone on the screen right now, centerforvein.com, their website. Certainly something of which we should all be familiar if you're especially getting older, if you have leg problems, cramps, if you have a problem sleeping because of restless legs, any variety of these symptoms that Libby has described. Certainly look for more information on the website. Give Libby a call. Hopefully you've got something out of this show. I know I have. My wife suffers sometimes from restless leg. I think I may get her to come to lunch so that Libby can put that ultrasound on her leg. We'll be right back.